The evening sky over Valarith was a tapestry of deep indigo and burning gold, the last rays of sun melting into the jagged peaks that cradled the kingdom. Lady Alara stood at the balcony of her family estate, watching the shadows creep across the city. Her heart felt uneasy, though she could not name the reason. There was a weight in the air, a silence that pressed against the stones of the castle and the streets beyond. Valarith was a kingdom of whispers. Nobles traded secrets like currency, and danger often hid behind the most polite smiles. Alara, though young, had learned to read the subtle signs: the glance held too long, the smile that didn't reach the eyes, the servant's nervous shuffling. And tonight, every instinct in her body screamed that she was being watched. She turned at the sound of soft footsteps. A servant approached, carrying a lantern that flickered in the twilight. "Lady Alara," he said, bowing. "The king requests your presence at the evening gathering. There is something urgent he wishes to discuss." Alara's brow furrowed. She had been summoned to the royal hall many times, but this tone was different. Urgent. Fearful. It stirred something dangerous in her chest. "Thank you," she replied, her voice steady. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. She had never feared Kaelin, the Alpha King. Though many did, his presence was both commanding and distant, like the mountain itself. Beautiful, untouchable, and terrifying. The road to the palace was lined with torchlight, the flames flickering across her cloak as she walked. The closer she drew to the castle, the heavier the feeling of danger became, pressing against her chest like a living thing. Every shadow seemed to shift. Every wind-carrying leaf sounded like a whisper of warning. When she entered the great hall, she froze for a heartbeat. Kaelin stood there, tall and powerful, his presence dominating the room. His dark eyes, sharp and unreadable, scanned the gathering with a predator's patience. Nobles bowed and whispered, but none dared approach him too closely. Kaelin's gaze fell on her. A shiver ran down her spine, and she felt the unspoken tension between them, a pull that neither fear nor desire could fully contain. "Lady Alara," he said, his voice low, smooth like polished steel. "Come closer." She obeyed, though her heart pounded. The crowd seemed to blur around them, and for a moment, there was only the two of them. He stepped near, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. His eyes searched hers, and there was a weight in them she could not read. "You're in danger," he whispered, brushing a strand of hair from her face. His hand lingered just a second too long. "Pretend I'm your husband." Alara's breath caught. Her mind spun with confusion and disbelief. The court was filled with spies, nobles who would not hesitate to use her as a pawn. Was he serious? And if so, why? "Why?" she whispered back, her voice trembling despite her efforts to remain composed. "Because the one who comes for you will not hesitate," Kaelin replied, his tone firm, almost harsh. "If they see me at your side, they will think twice. Trust me, Alara. For tonight, for your life, we are bound." The words were simple, yet the weight behind them pressed down on her heart. Pretend he was her husband. It felt intimate, dangerous, and impossibly real, and though she wanted to resist, a part of her knew she had no choice. The evening passed in a blur of masked glances, whispered plots, and careful steps. Alara stayed close to Kaelin, their hands brushing occasionally, the contact sending sparks of confusion through her mind. She hated herself for feeling the warmth of his presence, the strange comfort of being shielded by someone so powerful. Yet the court was a deadly game, and she had learned that survival often meant wearing masks of her own. As night fell, the tension in the hall thickened. Torches burned brighter, casting long shadows on the stone walls, and the flickering light seemed to animate every secret lurking in the corners. Alara felt eyes on her, watching, calculating, and then she saw it. A figure in the shadows, moving with a careful precision. A glint of metal catching the torchlight. An assassin. Panic surged, but before she could react, Kaelin was at her side. His hand gripped hers, strong and unyielding. He moved with a speed and grace that left her breathless, placing himself between her and the shadowy figure. "You're not alone," he murmured, his voice steady, confident. "Not tonight." The assassin lunged, and chaos erupted. Nobles screamed and scattered, the clang of metal echoing through the hall. Kalen's movements were fluid, almost otherworldly, his strength and skill unmatched. Alara could hardly keep her eyes on the figure he fought. Her own heart raced too fast, a mixture of fear and awe. And then, just as quickly as the threat had appeared, it vanished. The figure slipped away into the darkness, leaving only a dagger on the floor. Its blade poisoned. Kalen's eyes met hers. The faintest shadow of worry passed over his face, and for a moment, she saw the man beneath the myth, the man who carried the weight of the crown, and something more, something dangerous that lingered in his very being. "Alara," he said softly, kneeling to pick up the dagger. "They will come again. And next time, it may not be so easy to stop them." Her hands trembled, but she met his gaze. There was fear, yes, but also something more, a strange, fierce trust that had begun to take root. She realized that pretending he was her husband had saved her life, and perhaps, in ways she did not yet understand, it had changed the rules between them. The night stretched on, and the castle seemed alive with unseen eyes and whispered threats. Every shadow could hide a danger. Every smile could conceal betrayal. And yet, at her side, Kalen remained a constant, a shield, a mystery, a storm contained in a man's form. As the hall emptied and the torchlight dimmed, Kalen leaned close, his voice brushing against her ear. "Rest tonight, Alara. Tomorrow, we plan. Tomorrow, we fight. And remember," his words dropped to a near whisper, charged with an intensity she could not name, "for tonight, we are bound. No one will touch you while I stand here." Alara's heart thudded in her chest, a mixture of fear, gratitude, and something more unspoken, unclaimed. She had stepped into a game far larger than she had imagined, a game of shadows, power, and deadly intent. And at the center of it all stood Kalen, the Alpha King, dangerous, commanding, and, inexplicably, close to her heart. As she left the hall, a strange wind swept through the corridors, carrying a faint whisper. Alara paused, listening. The dagger on the floor had been only a warning. The assassin would return, or perhaps someone even more sinister. And she knew, with chilling certainty, that her life and her heart would never be the same. The sun rose slowly over Valorith, painting the jagged mountains with pale gold. Lady Alara moved through the quiet corridors of her estate, her mind restless from the night's events. The memory of the dagger, the assassin, and Kalen's whispered command lingered in her thoughts like a shadow she could not shake. She knew the warning had been real. Someone in the court wanted her dead, and Kalen, the Alpha King, had placed himself between her and danger. The thought made her chest tighten. She had trusted no one before, yet she realized she had begun to trust him. And that trust felt as fragile as spun glass. The court was alive with whispers as soon as she arrived. Servants and nobles glanced at her with curiosity, suspicion, and something else. Fear. She knew their eyes judged her, measured her, and perhaps even wondered why Kalen had taken such interest in a single lady of the court. Kalen did not appear immediately. That morning, the court seemed normal, yet she could feel the tension beneath the polished speeches and courteous smiles. Every glance from a noble felt loaded, every whisper behind a fan or column carried weight. Finally, he appeared. Kalen walked through the hall, with the power of the mountains in his step. His dark cloak brushed the floor, and his presence silenced the murmurs. When his eyes met hers, there was no pretense, no courtly politeness, only a sharp, commanding gaze that seemed to pierce through the very walls. "Alara," he said, his voice calm but edged with warning. "Come with me. There are matters we must discuss." Away from prying eyes, she obeyed, her heart beating faster as they left the hall. The hallways grew narrower, the torches casting long shadows on the stone walls. Here, away from the court, the tension between them became a living thing, almost tangible in the space between their shoulders. "Last night was only the beginning," Kalen said, his tone quiet but firm. "The people who wish to harm you are powerful, cunning, and patient. We must be prepared for anything." Alara nodded, though her thoughts raced. "Why me?" she asked. "I am just a lady of the court. Surely there are others who could be targeted." Kalen's eyes darkened, and for a moment, he seemed to carry a weight far heavier than any king should bear. "You are not just a lady, Alara. You have a mind that notices, a courage that acts, and a heart that is not easily swayed. They fear what you could become, and they fear what I might do for you." Her chest tightened at his words. The danger was real. Yet the closeness of the Alpha King, the force of his presence, stirred feelings she could not name. She forced herself to focus on survival, on the plans that needed to be made. "Then we must be cautious," she said, trying to steady her voice. "We cannot trust anyone completely." Kalen nodded, a flicker of approval in his dark eyes. "Good. Trust is earned, not given. And you, Alara, must learn to wield both caution and courage. You are not just protected by me. You are part of the defense." They spent the morning in strategy. Kalen explained the politics of the court, the rival nobles who sought power, and the dark magic that sometimes guided their schemes. Alara listened intently, her mind absorbing every detail. She realized that survival would require more than courage. It would require intelligence, observation, and sometimes deception. As they spoke, Kalen's tone softened at times, revealing glimpses of the man behind the title. He was not merely a ruler. He was a guardian, burdened by a legacy he did not choose, but could not escape. Alara began to see why he carried both fear and fascination in equal measure. By afternoon, Kalen led her to the palace gardens. The courtyard was vast, filled with hedges trimmed into impossible shapes, fountains that sparkled with crystal water, and statues of kings long past. Here, the court's schemes seemed distant, and the world felt quieter. "Alara," Kalen said, stopping near a fountain. "You must understand something. The danger is not only from men. There are forces in Valorith older than the throne, darker than any mortal ambition, spirits that resent the living, curses that cling to bloodlines, and whispers that twist truth into poison." She shivered, though not entirely from fear. The poetic cadence of his words, the intensity in his gaze, made her feel as though she were standing at the edge of a cliff, dangerous, thrilling, and utterly compelling. "Then we face them together?" she asked. "Yes," he replied simply. "Together, or not at all." The afternoon passed with lessons, discussions, and silent walks through the garden. Each moment brought them closer, though neither spoke of what stirred in their hearts. The tension was a constant current, electric and dangerous. Alara could not forget the way he had whispered in her ear, the warmth of his hand when he guided her through the hall, the strength that had shielded her from the assassin's strike. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the courtyard grew shadowed and cool. A messenger arrived, panting and covered in dust. He handed Kalen a folded parchment, sealed with the mark of an unknown noble. Kalen broke the seal, his expression darkening as he read. "They know more than we thought," he said, voice low. "They have allies beyond the court. Someone seeks to manipulate the curse that follows me, using it to strike at you." Alara felt her stomach tighten. The word curse had always been part of Kalen's legend, but she had never understood its weight. Now, the reality pressed down on her. The danger was far deeper than politics. It was ancient, hidden, and lethal. "We must leave the palace," Kalen said. "Tonight, you will not sleep within its walls. I will keep you safe, but only if we move before the darkness comes." She nodded, trusting him despite the fear that churned in her chest. They moved swiftly through secret passages, the stone corridors echoing their footsteps. The air was cold, carrying the scent of damp earth and old magic. Elara could feel her pulse quicken, not just from fear, but from the closeness of Kaelin. Once outside, they rode into the forest that bordered the kingdom. The trees rose like silent sentinels, their branches intertwining to form a dark canopy. Shadows danced in the lantern light, and every sound, the rustle of leaves, the cry of a distant owl, felt amplified. "Elara," Kaelin said, his voice a whisper through the night. "You must trust me completely. One misstep, one hesitation, and we both could fall into their trap." She met his gaze, seeing not just the Alpha King, but the man behind the power. His eyes held both warning and something else, a spark of intimacy that made her chest tighten. "I trust you," she said softly, though her mind screamed with caution. They rode deeper into the forest, each shadow seeming to watch, each step feeling heavier with unseen eyes. Then, a sudden movement caught her attention. A flash of black, too fast for her to identify. Kaelin's hand went to his sword instinctively, his body moving with a predator's grace. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Elara clutched the reins, heart pounding, as Kaelin's gaze locked on the unseen threat. A figure emerged, cloaked in shadow, moving with purpose. Elara realized with a shock that it was not just a mortal enemy. There was something different in the way it moved, almost unnatural, like a shadow given life. Kaelin's voice was a low growl. "Stay behind me." The figure froze, then dissolved into mist, leaving a chill in its wake. Elara shivered, realizing that the danger was far more than she had imagined. Kaelin's warnings were true. The court, the assassins, the dark forces, they were all connected. And she was at the center. For the first time, she understood the depth of what Kaelin had whispered the night before. "Pretend I'm your husband." It was not just a game, not just protection, it was a binding of fates. A connection forged in fear and necessity. And now, in the forest's shadowed heart, she realized she was no longer merely pretending. Kaelin turned to her, his dark eyes softening slightly. "We survived this together," he said, "but know this, Elara, the forest, the court, even the shadows themselves, they will test you. They will test us. And when they do," his voice trailed, heavy with warning and unspoken promise. Elara's hands trembled on the reins, but she nodded. "Then we face them together," she said. And this time, her voice carried certainty. The forest stretched on, endless and filled with unseen threats, as the night deepened around them. Somewhere in the shadows, the assassin waited, or perhaps something far older, more dangerous, more cunning. And in the quiet between heartbeats, Elara felt the weight of Kaelin's hand on hers, the unspoken bond that had begun between them, fragile yet fierce. The forest was alive with shadows, and every rustle of leaves seemed louder in the cold night air. Lady Elara clung tightly to the reins, her eyes straining to see through the thick darkness. Kaelin rode beside her, his presence a solid reassurance. Yet the tension in his shoulders betrayed the dangers they faced. The howl had come again, closer this time, and the forest seemed to pulse with a strange, unnatural energy. It was as if the trees themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. Elara's heart raced, but beneath the fear, there was a flicker of excitement, a dangerous thrill that she could not ignore. Kaelin's hand brushed hers as he guided her away from a low-hanging branch. The touch was brief, yet it sent a jolt through her, a reminder of the closeness they shared in the midst of peril. She forced herself to focus, pushing aside the warmth that spread through her chest. Survival came first. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, a man, cloaked in black, his movements swift and deliberate. His eyes gleamed with malice in the lantern light, and he carried a dagger that seemed to drink in the darkness around it. Kaelin's sword flashed as he moved, striking with a precision that left no room for error. The figure dodged, and for a moment, it seemed almost as if the shadow itself had come alive, twisting and shifting in ways that defied reason. "Elara, stay behind me," Kaelin commanded, his voice low but firm. She obeyed, hiding behind the thick trunk of an ancient tree. Her breath came in short bursts, but she kept her mind clear. Scanning the forest for any sign of another threat, she could feel Kalen's presence, strong and unwavering, a shield against the darkness. The figure lunged again, and Kalen's sword met the dagger with a sharp clang. Sparks flew, and the air was filled with the scent of iron and fear. The clash of metal rang through the forest, echoing off the trees, a deadly rhythm that made Alara's heart pound. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the figure vanished into the shadows. The forest fell silent, leaving only the sound of their breathing and the whisper of the wind. Alara stepped forward, her legs trembling, and saw Kalen's face tense, yet calm, a mixture of relief and warning in his dark eyes. "They are stronger than I thought," he said quietly, sheathing his sword. "And they will not stop until they have what they seek." Alara's mind raced. "What do they want from me? Why me?" Kalen's gaze softened, a rare vulnerability showing in his expression. "It is not just you," he said. "It is both of us. They seek to use the curse that follows me, to strike at everything I care for. And you have become part of that." Also, she shivered, realizing the full weight of his words. The curse, the danger, the unspoken power that Kalen carried with him, hidden beneath the armor of a king. And now, she understood that pretending he was her husband had placed her directly in the heart of the storm. They rode in silence for a while, the forest dark and oppressive around them. Then, Kalen spoke, his voice low and almost hesitant. "Alara, there is something I must tell you. Something I have never revealed to anyone." Her heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" she asked, though a part of her feared the answer. He stopped the horses in a small clearing, the moonlight spilling over the ground and illuminating the forest in a pale glow. Kalen dismounted and helped Alara down. His dark eyes held hers, intense and unflinching. "The curse," he began, "was placed on me centuries ago. It binds the spirit of a fallen king to my own. That spirit, it influences me, guides me, and sometimes, it fights me. It is the source of my strength, but also my isolation. No one can reach me fully because of it, until now." Alara listened, her pulse quickening. The man before her, the Alpha King, was not just powerful, he was burdened, haunted, and alone. And in that moment, she realized that the dangerous, magnetic presence that had drawn her in was more than a mask of royalty. It was a man struggling to be free of centuries of shadow and pain. Kalen took a step closer, and she felt the warmth radiating from him, a contrast to the chill of the night. "I have protected many, but never for someone like you," he admitted. "With you it is different. I cannot separate my will from the bond we share. Pretending, it was the only way to keep you alive, while I—" His words trailed off, and the silence that followed was heavy with unspoken meaning. Alara's breath caught. She had felt the pull between them, the electric tension. But now it was more than attraction. It was connection, forged in danger, trust, and shared fear. I understand," she said softly. "I feel it too. This bond, it is not just for survival. It is something more." Kalen's gaze softened further, and for a brief moment, the forest seemed to hold its breath. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering near her cheek. The closeness was intoxicating, a dangerous warmth that made her heart race. But before they could speak further, a sudden sound shattered the moment. A cry, high and piercing, echoing through the trees. Both of them stiffened, and Kalen's eyes darkened with warning. "They know we are here," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Move quickly, Alara. This is no ordinary enemy. We are being hunted by something older, something far more cunning than any mortal hand." They ran through the forest, the shadows twisting around them like living things. Ilara's mind raced, not with fear alone, but with the realization that she was no longer a passive participant. Her courage, her quick thinking, and her trust in Kalen were now as important as his strength. Branches scraped against her cloak, roots threatened to trip them, and the air grew thick with a strange, almost magical tension. Then, they stumbled into a small glade, where the moonlight revealed something that made Ilara gasp, a circle of glowing runes carved into the earth, pulsating with an eerie light. Kalen knelt, examining the symbols with a practiced eye. "A binding circle," he murmured. "They are trying to trap us. To use the curse against me and against you." Ilara's stomach twisted. "Can we stop it?" Kalen's expression was grim. "We can. But it will require trust, courage, and the willingness to confront the shadows within ourselves." The wind howled through the trees, and the glowing runes seemed to pulse faster, reacting to their presence. Ilara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. She understood that their bond, pretend or real, was now a necessity, a lifeline in the face of an enemy that would not relent. Kalen extended his hand to her. "We face this together, Ilara. No more pretense. We stand as allies, as something more." Her hand trembled as she placed it in his. The warmth that spread through her was more than physical. It was a connection of hearts, wills, and souls, entwined in danger and trust. She realized that she had crossed a threshold. She could no longer see Kalen as merely a protector. He was a partner, a force, a man whose strength and vulnerability had claimed a part of her heart. The runes flared, and the shadows in the glade began to move, twisting and growing, forming shapes that were almost human, almost beast. Kalen's sword gleamed as he stepped forward, placing himself in front of Ilara. "Stay close," he commanded, voice steady despite the growing threat. "We cannot falter." "Not now." Ilara nodded, gripping his arm, feeling the pulse of his heartbeat against her own. Together, they stepped into the circle, facing the shadows with courage born of necessity and an unspoken bond that neither could deny. The battle that followed was swift and terrifying. Shadows lunged, shapes twisted, and the air was filled with the hum of dark magic. Kalen's sword moved with precision and power, while Ilara, guided by instinct and the lessons he had taught her, dodged and countered where she could. Each moment of contact, each brush of his hand, reminded her that they were not alone in this fight. They were connected, their fates intertwined. Finally, with a forceful strike, Kalen shattered the central rune, and the shadows dissipated into nothingness. The glade fell silent, the only sound their heavy breathing and the whisper of the wind. Kalen turned to her, eyes searching hers. "You are remarkable, Ilara. Brave, quick, and true. You have proven that the bond we share is not just for survival, it is real." Ilara's chest heaved. I trust you, Kalen, completely." For a long moment, they simply stood there, hands clasped, hearts racing, the weight of danger and relief binding them in a way that words could not capture. Then, from the forest edge, a soft rustle made them both tense. Kalen's eyes narrowed. "They are not done," he said, "and neither is the court. But now, we are stronger. Together, we can face anything." Ilara nodded, feeling the truth of his words. She was no longer the frightened lady of the court. She was a partner in a battle against shadows, curses, and treachery. And in the depths of her heart, she knew that the bond they had forged, born of danger and trust, was only the beginning. The forest had grown silent after the encounter in the glade, but the air felt charged, as if the trees themselves held their breath. Lady Ilara and Kalen walked carefully through the shadows, their hands still intertwined, the bond between them stronger than ever. The strange figure from the edge of the glade lingered in their minds, a reminder that the danger was far from over. "Ilara," Kalen said quietly, breaking the silence, "we must return to the castle. The court is aware of our absence, and our enemies will take advantage of any delay. But first," he paused, his gaze sweeping the forest, alert and calculating. First, we must confront what haunts me. The curse that follows me and threatens you. Elara nodded. She had come to understand that Kaelin's strength, his dominance, and even the danger that had drawn her to him were all tied to something far older and darker than the court itself. Yet she did not fear him. If anything, her trust had deepened, tempered by the trials they had faced together. They moved deeper into the forest, guided by Kaelin's knowledge and instincts. Soon, they reached a clearing surrounded by ancient stones carved with symbols older than Valorith itself. The air was thick with magic, pulsing in a rhythm that made Elara's head spin. "This is the heart of the curse," Kaelin said, his voice low, reverent, and cautious. "The spirit of the fallen king has lingered here, feeding on fear and mistrust. To break it, we must face it together, without hiding, without pretense, and without fear." Elara swallowed hard. She felt a strange pull in her chest, a mixture of dread and determination. "Then we face it," she said, her voice steady, though her heart raced. Together, Kaelin reached out, taking her hand in both of his. The warmth that flowed through her was more than physical. It was a connection of courage, trust, and a shared destiny. The shadows around them shifted as if sensing their bond, flickering with anticipation. A cold wind swept through the clearing, carrying whispers of the past. Shapes began to form in the mist faces of those long dead. Eyes full of accusation, hands reaching for them. Elara tightened her grip on Kaelin's hand, feeling his strength anchoring her. The spirit of the fallen king appeared before them, tall and imposing, his presence both regal and terrifying. Kaelin stepped forward, sword in hand, yet his movements were cautious, controlled. "I have come to end this, to free both my kingdom and myself," he said, his voice firm. The spirit's gaze fell on Elara. "And who is this?" it demanded, its voice like wind through the mountains. "Why does she stand with you, mortal?" "She is no mortal," Kaelin replied. "She is my partner, my equal, and the one I trust. Her courage has proven that she belongs here, as much as I do." The spirit's eyes narrowed. "Trust? Courage? Mere words cannot break the bonds that tie me." Elara stepped forward, her voice clear and unwavering. "Then see for yourself. I am here not because I am unafraid, but because I choose to stand with him. You do not bind him with fear anymore, not with me here." The spirit hesitated. And for a moment, the clearing was still. The only sound, the heartbeat of the forest itself. Kaelin's eyes met Elara's, gratitude and admiration shining through the darkness. Together, they raised their hands toward the spirit, letting their bond, the trust, the courage, the loyalty between them, flow like a force the curse could not resist. A blinding light erupted from the stones, and the shadows writhed, twisting and breaking apart. The spirit's roar filled the air, a sound of anger, regret, and final release. Kaelin and Elara held their ground, unwavering, until the light faded, leaving only silence. When the glow dimmed, the spirit was gone. The curse that had haunted Kaelin for centuries was broken, or at least weakened, and a weight lifted from his shoulders. He looked at Elara, his dark eyes softer now, human in a way they had never been before. "You did this," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Together, we did this." Elara smiled, a mixture of relief and pride. "We are stronger together," she said simply. "And we are not done yet. The court still awaits. And they will not give up easily." They returned to the castle, moving through the shadows with quiet confidence. The night had changed them both. Elara felt no longer like a pawn in a dangerous game, but a partner, a woman whose courage and loyalty could influence the fate of a kingdom. And Kaelin, the Alpha King, seemed more human now, his powers still formidable, but his isolation softened by the bond they shared. The court had grown tense in their absence. Nobles whispered, their eyes darting toward the pair as they entered the hall. Kaelin's presence silenced them instantly, his command undisputed. He turned to the gathered nobles, his voice ringing clear and sharp. No further schemes will harm this lady, he declared. And anyone who dares will face consequences they cannot imagine. The room fell silent. Elara noticed the subtle shift in the court. The nobles who had plotted against her now looked uncertain, intimidated by both Kaelin's authority and the unspoken strength between them. Later, Kaelin and Elara stood in the private garden of the palace. The night cool and calm around them. The moon reflected off the fountain, casting gentle light on their faces. For the first time, there was no danger pressing in from every side, just the quiet, shared moment of victory and trust. Elara, Kaelin said, breaking the silence, I must thank you. You have given me more than courage in battle. You have given me hope, trust, and the realization that I am not alone. You have changed me. Ilara's heart swelled. And you have given me something too, Kaelin. You have shown me that bravery is not just about facing danger. It is about standing with someone, trusting them, and never giving up, even when the shadows seem endless. He reached for her hand again, this time holding it with a gentleness that belied his strength. Our bond is more than survival, he said. It is choice. It is trust. And it is something I cannot ignore. Elara looked into his eyes and saw the man she had begun to admire, trust, and care for, a man who carried the weight of centuries, yet chose to stand beside her, not above her. I cannot ignore it either, she whispered. For a long moment, they simply stood there. The world around them silent, their hearts beating in rhythm. The kingdom was safe for now. The curse weakened, and the court subdued. But in their eyes, there was a promise of something more, something forged in danger, tempered in trust, and sealed by shared courage. Just as they prepared to leave the garden, a messenger arrived, holding a folded letter, sealed with crimson wax. Kaelin broke the seal with a frown. Reading the contents, his expression shifted from curiosity to shock. Elara, he said, voice low. This letter. It is from the past. A truth I thought buried. A secret that changes everything I believed about my lineage and about this kingdom. Elara leaned closer, her heart racing. What is it? She asked, though a part of her feared the answer. Kaelin folded the letter slowly, his gaze meeting hers. It seems our story is far from over. There are truths even the curse could not hide. And they may test us in ways we have never imagined. Ama, Kruth si. Elara nodded, a mixture of excitement and fear thrumming through her veins. Whatever came next, she realized, they would face it together, bound not by pretense, but by choice, trust, and the bond forged through fire, shadow, and heart. The moon rose high above the palace, casting silver light over the walls and towers. In that quiet glow, Kaelin and Elara stood side by side, hands clasped, hearts aligned, ready to face whatever the future held. The kingdom, the court, and the shadows of the past waited, but for the first time, they were not afraid. And somewhere in the stillness, the wind carried a whisper, a promise that their story, dangerous and extraordinary, was only just beginning.